No, we are very happy to have James Rankin, head of research at Instant Group, is one of the most important brain behind the co-working industry in the world. Most likely, he knows everything about the market, the trends, etc. And we are very happy to have you, James, to give us the update about the market trends and what is happening now. The presentation you are giving us is where this flexible workspace goes next. Will go next, and then yeah, of course, we all ask ourselves how far it can go, and if we have no virus, if we make a better deal with it in the future. We all hope it's a promising future. But please, I'll let you introduce yourself and tell us more about all your knowledge.
Great. Thank you, Jean-Yves, and thanks very much for inviting me. As I'm sure everyone is, vastly disappointed that we couldn't meet in person, but next year, onwards and upwards. So yeah, I'm James Rankin, so I head up the research and insight team at the Instant Group. We're a flexible workspace specialist, advisor, and have been in the industry for about 20 years. So what I wanted to do today, and what Jean-Yves sort of asked me to look at, was, well, where does the flexible industry go next? In this section, I wanted to quickly cover what we're seeing in the industry right now, just in a couple of pages, and over the last sort of year or so, because I think that gives some context before we start looking at the sort of the opportunities or areas that I think the industry will support in its next phase of growth. Since joining the industry, I've continued to find new, I guess, aspects that are intriguing and interesting, which makes speaking at these conferences a lot less daunting, has to be said. And this year has certainly been no exception. I think if we're honest, workspace or workplace strategy has never been top of an MD or a CEO's priority list. Today, I don't think that statement can be further from the truth. CEOs of major companies are signing off huge workspace change plans. Not only that, but those that have traditionally been focused on sort of providing just a line of desks, and now sort of moving on and finding themselves actually having to become in HR strategy and IT development, which I think is completely, changing what they do, completely changing their thinking, and simply put, they need your help because they don't really know what they need to do or how they can do it. So help from people like you in the industry is absolutely vital. So where does the industry go next? I think in the long term, simply put, it disappears. And that maybe is a little bit of a strong statement in a conference like this, but let me clarify that point. What I mean by that is the industry becomes part of the normal solution, and therefore part of a standard workplace strategy that will involve elements of traditional office space, elements of home working, and importantly, large elements of what we consider today sort of the flexible workspace industry. That means it stops being about them and us, and instead becomes just one solution that occupiers and customers are looking for. I think in the short term, there are several directions that an industry can take to remain kind of the solution of choice for occupiers and customers, above and beyond the key elements of sort of flexibility and service that are the bedrock of the flexible workspace industry. And these are what I'll sort of be focusing on shortly. But first, and I hope you're in agreement, I think it's important to put some context around this. In short, at least from a demand perspective, where we are right now in Europe is kind of right back where we started at this point 2 years ago, or close enough. While we've seen big swings, broadly speaking, in overall demand levels, they've not massively changed from that point 2 years ago. But where that demand is coming from and what it looks like is certainly different. Some of the things that we're seeing when we dig a bit deeper mean that despite the confidence that Carsten mentioned, being in the industry at a pretty high point, both from occupiers and individuals involved in the industry, such as yourselves, it remains quite a challenging market. Why? I think sales cycles are still about 20% longer, meaning that for many sort of the occupancy rates are still below where they want them to be. That's leading to sort of discounting still happening to a certain extent. I think rates in most markets are still down on where they were, although they are recovering, and quite quickly, which is really positive. And customers have started to change. Importantly, what they want is shifting. Usage on Fridays, I don't know about you, but in our office on a Friday, in a company that we speak to, is down at least 50% compared to what it is midday weeks. And therefore, the expectations from customers for data around how their employees are using those spaces is changing. The value they want to see is different from what it was. And I think all those things mean that the customers are ultimately more demanding, profits are being squeezed, and ultimately everyone's working harder than they ever have to just kind of keep things above where they want them to be. On a positive note, I found this quote in one of the major New York papers, and I think that this sums up the industry where we'll be going really well, which is it would take a couple more zeros on my paycheck to get me back commuting 4 or 5 days a week. That sums up very much where we are at the moment and where the occupier is thinking. It's not really all bad news, though, I think, and despite many, us not being able to meet in person, things are looking up, or they were until about a week ago anyway. Transactions are now up about 30% compared to last year within Europe. And the major cities are gaining a large proportion of what they lost over sort of a year and a half ago. Even in markets that have traditionally had quite tough times, such as Portugal, Q3 was the first time this year that we've seen growth compared to previous quarters, which is it shows that recovery is starting to happen even in the tougher markets. And equally in markets such as, France, Spain, the Netherlands, Germany, they're all seeing really strong recovery at a top line level, with broadly speaking inquiries, certainly through our platform at least, up about 38% on average now, which is really strong. So looking ahead, I think, we wanted to understand what customers are thinking about and looking for. And to do this, we spent the last 3 months interviewing about 40 heads of real estate for large corporate companies to understand what they see as the main changes in the road ahead. And I think that gives us a good view of not just those large companies, but also what some of the smaller companies are likely thinking. This gives us a basis to think about where the flexible industry will go next. Ultimately, we're a service-led industry. We're there to service our clients and provide them with solutions. After all, the industry made a name for itself on keeping ahead of the curve. I think broadly speaking, these themes fall into 4 categories. 3 of them are human, physical, and digital. From a human element, it's about answering the need of the employees wanting more choice, where they work, how they work, enabling collaboration, etc. Physically, I think they're looking at space to try new approaches and importantly measure those new approaches and understand the results. In many cases, reducing the footprint of their sort of dedicated own offices and instead looking at multiple approaches to sort of fill that gap. And finally, from a digital perspective, I think they're looking towards technology to help them understand usage and value of space, but equally also deliver equal experience for employees in the office and those at home. Ultimately, if I think a workplace or workspace can deliver, on those 3 attributes, then it'll be far ahead of the competition and ultimately answering the customer's needs. So where can the flexible industry sort of go to deliver on those core attributes? I wanted to touch on sort of each of those 3. The first one being human. It's about choice. It's something that we've already seen within the industry. We're seeing spaces enter the market in new locations, particularly locations sort of within shopping centres or near home, outside of traditional CBDs. That direction of travel has been going on for a while now, but I think it's certainly speeding up, and that's what we're going to see in this big next phase of growth within the industry. Equally, I think companies are looking for choice in how their employees use space. So this could be through membership apps, which I know are becoming increasingly popular, or even splitting usage throughout the week. These are areas I think which the traditional industry is still, a long way behind in terms of even thinking about, let alone engaging in. And therefore, I think there's a big opportunity for the flexible workspace industry to move into this area and fill that hole. Every company we speak to is complaining about underutilized office space with peaks in utilization throughout the week. At the same time, they want a space that can be private to a certain extent and allow their teams to work together at times and then collaborate in others. So why not share office space, between companies using half a week for one, half a week for another, 2/3, 3, however that's split. But I think there's opportunity to change the way companies, use space. From a physical element, we see far more companies looking at what types of space outside the traditional meeting rooms and desks can deliver more value for their employees. And I think this is more about the service, but the space itself, and making sure that it delivers on the sort of the ever evolving needs of the occupier. We know that collaboration is becoming a buzzword across customers, and that's something that has traditionally been a key USP of the flexible workspace industry. I think, therefore, thinking ahead and with a greater focus on this, we'll see the traditional sector start to do more, and therefore the flexible sector has to sort of raise that bar again. I think this starts by getting, the spaces themselves right, making sure they deliver on the key functions which they're intended, and then keep progressing that. For instance, outside spaces can be turned into meeting rooms if the right infrastructure is put in place. Meeting rooms can become destinations through the use of design, and ultimately open environments can not just sort of allow collaboration, but actually encourage it, again, through what is put into that space. And I think that's what we'll see this industry do next, is thinking about how do we maximize the value of each of these types of space in our offices. Ultimately, I see the flexible workspace industry sort of leading in that thinking. And I think customers are going to be coming to the industry asking those questions. What can you offer me? I think that leads me relatively kind of nicely into digital, a topic that covers ultimately a whole range of areas, but can be broken down, I think, into two specific areas of need right now. One is simply using technology to allow those in the office and those in other locations to have sort of an equal experience in a meeting. So far, no company we've spoken to feels this happens in their office, and all are looking for answers. For the flexible workspace industry, I think this is something that we feel is an obvious next step. We see multiple meeting rooms with, AV technology built in, unlike, again, in the traditional sector where most meeting rooms are still very much focused on just those in the room. I think businesses, both large and small, are far more likely to be willing to test new types of product, whether that's maybe virtual reality, telepresence, 360-degree cameras, or even just sort of touchscreen presentation tools that allow those in and out the room to see the same thing. And I think the industry has an opportunity to become a test bed for some of these slightly more out there technologies, where companies are going to be looking to, can I come and try that? Can I come and see how that works? What value that adds? And I think those that start embracing them early will really kind of have some key USPs there. I think secondly, and maybe most important in the midterm element, is more about the measurement of value from the space. Right now, I think companies can only tell how many people are in a building, really in just crude entry pass technology. We're already starting to see software providers working within the flexible workspace industry start to measure utilization through Wi-Fi networks and even sort of sensor technology. And I think that's a step ahead of where the traditional sector is already, but they will quickly catch up. So the data that delivers, clear information on return on investment metrics, such as interactions between teams, time spent in collaboration, and ultimately sort of cost per head, I think are all elements that we expect to first start to be seen within this flexible workspace industry. And again, leading the cutting edge of that technology. In summary, technology, I think, is sort of proving to be one of the most important elements that will gel the future office together. And I see the flexible workspace, as an ideal environment for both providers and users to test these products out and understand what really works for them. Before I finish up with a kind of a quick look at where we see the future going in terms of sort of market sizes, I'll leave you to read most of these statements, but I wanted to sort of focus on two. One is, I would pay up to 25% premium if the location delivered on this. That's from a client of ours. The other is, just 11% of flexible operators provide any measurement to their clients on this. I don't know if you can guess what the topic is. Ultimately, it's sustainability, or ESG, which stands for environmental, social, and governance, corporate governance. I think a year ago, this was something that, while mentioned, was of limited priority. To be fair, even today, only sort of 24% of real estate professionals have this as part of their top 3 objectives based on the research we did. But the speed at what that this is changing is incredible. Right now, the traditional industry is still a very, very long way behind what customers are wanting and asking for. Frankly, the flexible workspace industry is as well. But the simple fact is, in general, if you can get ahead of this curve and start offering or thinking about this or talking to your clients about this, I think we'll see a huge wave of new demand coming up off the back of it. The fact is that increasing number of clients are looking at this as a priority, are willing to pay more. And equally, their employees are increasingly feeling it's an important factor. Should be something that we think about. Not all, your clients will care about this, frankly, depending on which country you're in or the size of the businesses you work within your space. I think, but what we are hearing is that right now it's becoming a key priority for the majority of global businesses. That will trickle down through the different size of businesses over time. I think most have only just sort of looked at their real estate in this light, but the momentum is certainly gaining. And right now, do you need to worry or be concerned? Possibly not. But if you want to stand out and I think achieve the best possible rates, keep ahead of the competition, and sort of gain that next level of customer, then this is certainly something that can be looked at as one of your kind of core elements or USPs. So to try and sort of summarize where I think the flexible workspace industry will be next is simple. Doing what it's always done and delivering service and value for its customers. The big challenge will be that we're an increasingly competitive market, not just within the industry, but from those in sort of the traditional corporate real estate sectors and also those in other real estate sectors who are all looking for a piece of the pie. I think that means the industry will continue to adapt and answer the needs of its customers to stay ahead. It has to. It's not an easy journey, but certainly one that appears right now to be, quite a roller coaster. That being said, our predictions and forecasts point to quite a strong uptick in demand and supply through sort of 2023, possibly late 2020. And onwards, as the industry enters what I think is the next phase of growth. I think that'll be supported by increased adoption from large corporates and medium-sized businesses, but also sort of a renewed wave of startup and entrepreneurs that we're already seeing start to emerge out the back of the pandemic, far more than came from the global recession in 2008, looking at the data. So that'll be a huge boost to our traditional sort of client sectors. I think if we've sort of moved on from the innovation phase, we've crossed the typical chasm that exists. It's traditionally a major stumbling block for early adopters. And we're into this sort of early majority phase if you look at it from an industry adoption sort of bell curve. I think comparing this to other industries, genuinely speaking, that segment that I think we're entering in sees about 34% of market adoption, which compared to we're at probably 12% up till now is a huge increase. It's not all plain sailing. I expect that the next few years many customers will come to the industry looking for immediate solutions and answers with very high expectations, frankly. Ultimately, it will be, up to the industry to try and deliver on those, manage those expectations, but deliver on them where possible, and hopefully prove the value both of flexibility, but also the service that you all provide. Hopefully, make them converts, because the more clients we talk to, the more that they're willing to engage larger proportions of their workforce to the flexible workspace industry. A couple of years ago, we would talk maybe the tail end, the 5%. Now they're talking 15 to 25%, and that's changed over just 5 years. So we certainly are very positive where the industry will go. I think it's doing more of the same, keeping ahead of the customer, and ultimately providing the solutions that ever-changing customers are looking for. Sorry, that's sort of my quick summary. I hope that made sense. I don't know, Jean-Yves, if you have questions now or if people want to reach out.
But there is the chat room where everybody can ask questions and follow up on this. Thank you so much, James. Super insightful as always. I see a small Brexit again with the flex in your charts, as the UK was further than the others. I don't know why.
Yeah, we're behind. We're certainly behind Europe, I think, in terms of overall numbers now, which is great. I mean, we're only one country compared to many, so it's
yeah,
the
but
right way.
the UK was so much ahead during the last year in the flex market. That's just a catching up process.
It's a catching up process. We've seen such strong development from across Europe, not just in the major cities, but in the smaller ones, which is fantastic to see. And I think that really, should
fantastic.
be positive.
So we will keep going on with the conversation. Surely during this conference, there are some areas where we can chat, and there is the chat box as well for questions can be posted to James, and you will follow up, I guess.
Yeah, please send me messages, and I'll follow up. Yeah, of course.
Perfect.
Thanks.
Thank you again so much for everything, and we look forward to see you online or physically soon.
I hope so. Bye.
Bye bye. Bye bye.